So what I'm gonna do is get you to introduce yourself, and I'm just clicking go live. So it's gonna take a minute, but we'll start introducing you now.
Got it.
Yeah. So you can just introduce yourself.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, Robin. It's really fun to support you in creating this beautiful space for educating and training people around personal growth, development, spiritual. A global healer, educator, and speaker. I'm also a Theta Healing instructor. And one of the really fun things that I get to do is I'm a syndicated radio host for News for the Soul Broadcasting Network. One of my most exciting things is that I get to help leaders, visionaries, and change makers connect to their inner wisdom and unleash empowered authenticity so they can be the catalyst of change that they desire to see in the world. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And actually this year I'm celebrating 10 years of mastering ascension and working in the healing arts after leaving the corporate world. So that's actually, I kind of just realized I'm kind of cresting on my 10-year anniversary. So this year, so that's super fun.
That's amazing. 10 years is a long time.
I know, it went by felt like a minute.
2012 is when you started up your business?
Yeah, it is. I left the stock market and I think it's like 2010, 2011, did some soul searching. And then in 2012, actually April 1st, 2012 is when I wrote up my business plan. I think I opened my doors like mid-July. I'm going to go and look back at my numbers, but like this is the time of creation, really. It's like, and I feel like we're in that cycle again, you know, as we're moving through those energies. It's like another evolution, another layer, another level of growth. So it's very fitting now that I kind of look back and kind of look at the numbers, because it just gets away from you, right?
I just had I was just kind of thinking of where you, what brought you into the Theta Healing world? I'm just curious, because if you were in a completely different industry, something must have either inspired you or triggered you or.
Well, it did actually. One of the, and what I notice is that I tend to work with a lot of people that don't have the same journey, but have the same feelings or call to action, if you will. And so I had been working in the financial industry for 20 years. I had I had gone up the ring of the ladder. I was like, oh, I'll be happy when I get this promotion, another promotion, and the next promotion. And there I was, 30 branch manager of a multi-million-dollar firm, having kind of checked off one of the last boxes that I had. And I'm like, now what am I going to do with myself? And that void of fulfillment was still sitting there. And it took me a little while to kind of catch on to what was happening, because I loved my work. I was really good at it. I really enjoyed my clients. There was nothing wrong. And I think that was probably one of the most challenging things, is there was nothing on fire in my life per se. Like there wasn't this huge rude awakening that happened that lured me to a different way of life. It was just this ever growing void. I'd wake up in the morning with this huge feeling of dread. And I didn't know why. I was like, what is wrong with me that I'm not grateful for all the beautiful things that I have, all the success that I've achieved, all the relationships that I have. So I was really feeling a little bit guilty for not being happier in my life. And a lot of the executives and leaders and CEOs and go-getters that I end up working with have that ache, if you will, in their heart. And they're like, I don't know what's wrong with you. I feel kind of guilty and ashamed that I'm not happier. And what it was essentially is my soul came knocking. And thankfully, it was mostly a gentle and loving process. I was still quite stubborn at that time of my life. So there was a little bit of being dragged, kicking and screaming from the universe. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I actually needed to do this. And it was really weird in a lot of ways. Like some people kind of like stumble their way to a different experience. And it's like, as soon as I acknowledged within myself, I know there's something more to their life, or there's got to be something more to life than just this. And it's like the universe was just waiting for me to ask the question. And then everything lined up perfectly for me. And I remember sharing with my mom what I was going to do with my life, that I was going to like let go of my pension, my career, all my my status, if you will. Like I had quite a bit of I was kind of a veteran, not a veteran, but I had a lot of years into that particular company. So I was letting go of all of that I had accumulated, if you will. And I told her that I was going to start a energy healing company where I was going to focus and support people in integrative health. And she like turned every shade of blue and green, I should say. And she thought I'd lost my mind. And I just remember being so sure that that's what I needed to do. And I know a lot of people don't have that certainty, because I work with a lot of people that are like, I know there's something more, but I'm not sure what that is. And I want to like kind of give the blessings of my intuition. For whatever reason, I was able to get a very clear message and download, even though at that time I had like zero intuitive development. I had practiced no amount of that really, other than in my younger teenage years when I used to pull tarot cards way back in the day and used to play with astrology. So I had no formal training at that time, but there was this like shot download activation within me, and every cell in my body was like, this is what we need to do. And I guess that's kind of like long story, short story long, but it was really kind of a soul level call to action. I woke up one day and it was like, I can't do this anymore, or there needs to be more to life than this. And then everything just lined up. And then it's really interesting because then it's like this whole world moved into my field of view that was like sitting right in front of me. I was like, wow, how did I not notice that booth at the farmer's market and talk to my existing friends about this topic? Like there was this whole hidden world sitting right in front of me, but I was too kind of disconnected from myself to really tap into it. And then I discovered the realm of energy psychology. And it was like, I discovered my new chocolate. I was like, ooh, I want so much more of this. Like, tell me more. And it just kind of awoke a new level of desire for learning for me that hasn't been stifled in 10 years. Like every day I'm like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to discover today. So it's allowed me to like wake up every day now, excited about what I'm going to get to experience, what I'm going to get to learn, what I'm going to get to uncover, what I'm going to get to heal, what I'm going to get to expand into. And I was like, wow, this is a way better way of experiencing life than waking up going, oh, I got to do it all over again, kind of thing. So that's my short story long on how I got from here to there.
I love it because I feel like you're psychic, but you don't like label yourself that way. Do you agree?
I do. And I don't know what it is about the term psychic or medium, or I find those terms get kind of used in different ways. And so there can be a lot of misunderstanding of what that means. And something that I've discovered actually working in believe it or not, business development, is the best professionals are highly intuitive, right? So like all of those professionals don't even realize that they're intuitive, but like they just know. And when I look back at when I was working in as a financial analyst, I was extremely intuitive. And that's actually how I did my job, is I'd be able to look at a report and like see between the numbers and be like, something feels off here. And so even back then, without even realizing how intuitive I was, when I look back now, knowing what I know and having the training and the capacity that I have, I was like, wow, I was like using my intuition and I didn't even know about it. And that's something that makes me excited, is going, wow, what would happen if we would allow people to recognize when and how they use their own intuition in their life and actually support them in amplifying it in a way that's more conscious, that's more on purpose, and that's more proactive, how much more they would be able to achieve, and with less effort.
Hmm.
Because I remember some of my colleagues would go through reports line by line by line, and I'd just be able to point the number that was off. And they were like, how did you know that? I was just like, it just feels wrong. Let's look at this one first. And especially when you're balancing, multi-million-dollar books, and then you're like, all right, there's like, we're off by this amount. Shoot, like where's that transaction that's not balancing? So it's kind of fun to look back and be like, wow, and all the weird, crazy experiences that I had that I was completely oblivious to. Like, people would gift me these stones specifically for developing your intuition. Like, I can't tell you how many intuitive stones I was gifted by people. And at the time, I didn't know anything about stones or really intuition. And like, even some readings that, for me, I was doing them as entertainment back in the day, but they're like, you're a gifted healer and you're highly intuitive. And I'm like, oh, what do they want, a tip? And I thought it was like, like a, what's the scam kind of thing. But now when I look back, I laugh, because I'm like, oh my God, the exact thing that they shared with me in those sessions are specifically the gifts and the tools that I use now. And so it's really interesting how you can be right in the middle of something and be completely unaware. And so in a way, that's really taught me a lot of humility in the work that I do, recognizing that, you can have the highest level of training and education, and you can do the most amount of like meditation and still be completely oblivious to what's happening right beside you. So one of the things that it's kind of like allowed me to be open and receptive to is always asking the question, what am I not seeing? Like, what am I not feeling? What am I not recognizing within this experience? And those kind of questions actually led me to Theta Healing back in the day when I started, when I did my first training. It actually was kind of like everything else that the universe does for me, is it brought Theta Healing to my healing center through a referral. A friend of mine knew a teacher that wanted to teach in Moncton, and I had a training space available. And they're like, hey, do you want to sit in on this class as an exchange for rent? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, well, it looks kind of interesting. And I had like a couple of Theta sessions, but I didn't expect it to be to change my life, if you will, in the way that it did. Like, something awoke inside of me that first weekend that I did my practitioner training. And I remember the class ran from Friday to Tuesday, and we did basic and advanced back to back, which I highly recommend people do it that way if they can. I remember it being Saturday, like before lunch. And I was just like, oh my God, everybody needs to know this about themselves, and everyone has to have access to this capacity. And because I knew that it was an innate capacity that each and every one of us have access to. It's just about learning how to do it. And I remember this moment so clearly. My teacher looked over at me and she goes, Anik, you're going to teach this. And I looked at her, and I'm usually kind of like super humble and be like, oh, that's nice of you to say. Like, I'm not really usually good at like accepting statements like that. But I looked right at her and I said, I know, which was kind of surprised me, where I didn't hesitate. But it was like, I had that again moment where every cell in my body was like, you need to share this. And I've had those kind of seldom moments here and there in my life, but I know when they show up, that's my soul's going, yes, this is, that's, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you have the same experience when your soul just kind of shows up, and it was like, there is no miscommunicating or confusion about what your soul is trying to relate to. And that activation, or almost like this like deep knowingness, or like a download, or however, there's so many different ways of saying it, but I'm sure you've had those experiences as well.
I relate to it in terms of just like energy. Like I'm just like you. I feel energy, and yes,
Mm.
downloads, but it's just this. It's hard to explain, but it's this feeling of like push and pull when you really gravitate towards someone, like you're falling in love with someone, you can just feel it,
Mm.
right? You feel the spark or the connection. And when you're around things that aren't bringing out that light or that love or that spark, it can be quite obvious. And I think most people feel that way. They just don't maybe want to make the change. Like you made a big change quickly. It sounds like you were like, I
Mhm.
can do this. Whereas I feel like people get that hunch or that intuitive feeling, but they just go into their logical and say like, oh, my pension, or I have all these years
Mhm.
already put in, or what is my mother going to think? So I think that's amazing that you were confident enough to make the change no matter what anybody else thought, because I'd say you learned that, well, you naturally have that, but I think we all naturally have that. I think through your probably work experience, sounds like you were already building up your confidence in the work world too. And
Mhm.
you felt like, okay, I already have like a business background or a work background that you could almost like transfer skills over from one thing to the next. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like I was really fortunate because a lot of the people that I support, because one of the things and the focuses that I have, that's been the soul, my soul's kind of like informed me, for lack of a better term, of like my current mission, which is to move practitioners and professionals forward through coaching, training, and education. And one of the things that shows up a lot is and the model that we're built on and the education system is built to be a really good employee, but it doesn't really lend itself that well to be an entrepreneur. And so when you're a leader and a visionary, there's another type of skill set as well as mindset that you need to engage with in order for that to be um, a lot easier for you, for lack of a better term. It's not, I wouldn't use the word easy to describe, but it's certainly challenging, it's motivating, it's filled with passion. It's also great opportunities for growth, expansion, and evolution. When you're around your own company, like whatever you need to work on kind of shows up, and then you get that beautiful opportunity to work through your stuff, because your business is such a reflection of the inner work as well as the outer work that you're here to do. Or at least that's been my experience with a lot of the practitioners and business owners that I've worked with. And so one of the things that I notice is kind of the hurdle for a lot of people is they have like this experience as well as mindset of the employee model, and moving into an entrepreneur or business owner is like a huge jump of or leap of faith in themselves. One of the places where I feel I've been, and probably why I chose the incarnation that I did, is both my parents were serial entrepreneurs. And I saw how challenging it was for them, which is probably why I kind of like decided to become an employee from the get-go. And then I kind of, like ran its course, and thankfully I had a lot of business development training and background within what I had been doing. So it really lended itself well to transitioning into starting my own thing. So there was, what I've noticed is I didn't have a lot of the fears that most people would have, because a lot of people, or the biggest part of the population, are employees having been raised by parents who were also employees. So it's kind of like this running your own business can be kind of a whole different world to imagine. And there's this, I don't want to call it a false sense of security, but there is this accepted sense of security that, well, if I work for somebody else, then my paycheck is secure. Well, you've just kind of deferred that security to someone outside of you instead of it being on yourself, which means that you trust your employer more than you trust yourself to generate income for you. Is this making sense?
It's all, to me, I'm just getting it's all like kind of like faith based, taking risks and being a little more innovative and creative. And a lot of people want the to live kind of like you said, that's in that secure way. But the truth is, are we ever really, is anything ever really certain? Like, are you guaranteed to have that job in 10 years? or could something happen with the economy, which is kind of what we're experiencing right now, and you could actually lose your job. Something could happen. So I
Mhm.
think the new way of people are starting to kind of live in that more innovative, creative way
Mhm.
because we've lost so much security in the way that the world is. So it's like you said, that trust is really important. I need to rely on myself more than anyone and develop these skills and tools so I maybe have a backup of some sort too. So yeah, that brings up like a lot of different kind of topics, but that's kind of what I get is that there's really that security piece plays a role for people, but how secure is your job too?
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and kind of speaking to that, one of the topics that we look at a lot at theta healing is the undercurrent and the subtle drivers that can either come from a position of love and purpose or fear. And when we allow fear to drive us, it can create a lot of, well, it doesn't can create, it creates a lot of suffering, whether we're paying for it short term or long term. At least this has been my experience. And when we unfortunately use the catalyst of fear in order to make change, a lot of the time there's this hidden cost that we're paying that we don't quite recognize because of the physiology, that like what happens to your body when you use that fear-based motivator and catalyst in order to create change or allow change to take shape in your life. And that's been kind of one of my personal missions in the world, is to dissolve as much as possible, because it's very culturally ingrained in us. So I'm going to do my best and see where it lands at the end of my life. But one of the main things that I would love to see in our world is to dissolve this struggle based growth model that we use. And I find it creates so much hardship, which is so unnecessary for humanity, that we use struggle for growth, that we use hardship to expand. And yes, I understand that, like it takes a lot of courage to change. And sometimes the fear and the discomfort that you're living in has to be bigger than the fear of change itself in order for that threshold to be met for some people. But there's another way to evolve, learn, and expand, and that's based out of love and desire instead of fear and hardship. And so that's something that I love to speak to a lot, is resolving and releasing this old paradigm that we exist in, where we celebrate our achievements when we've struggled a lot for them, and we kind of minimize and dismiss things that come easy in the achievements that we've been able to access when we have allowed love and passion to let these things flow easily into our lives. And I find that those things get under celebrated. Is this making sense?
Yeah, well, I actually pulled up a couple cards um already, and like just tarot cards, and one of them,
Mm-hmm.
so you're kind of speaking to that because I was like, okay, these cards need to come up. They're gonna come up in conversation.
Mm.
But you mentioned tarot, which is interesting. So I'm like, she's psychic. She knows. I have a grateful shirt on right now. She's talking about gratitude. Like she can see. It's like she can see.
I
Anyway,
know. I can't tell you how many people that look at me sometimes and they're like, oh my God, it's like, and you're in my head. And they're like, those are the exact words I was thinking. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I was like, that's my job. That's what I'm here to help you with, is take those words that are in your head and translate them back to you so you can, so yeah, I love that we're so in tune today. And because I don't bring up the tarot thing very much because it was just kind of like this blurb in my life, but I do kind of have this what's the right word, a novel, not a novelty, but like this old like love of the tarot, because that's kind of like where I began my dabbling, if you will.
right, and so did I. That was that. I thought that I was just reading from a book, only to find out that that was just a simple tool for me to start.
Yeah, that's cool. And which cards did you get?
The Chariot. or the chariot, whatever, however you pronounce it, Archangel Metatron, because they're tarot and angel cards. But it says an important achievement, self-discipline, and willpower, public recognition. So you're just talking about celebrating, being more celebratory around the things that you're doing. And I also think about that self-love piece and investing time and energy into yourself as well. Because if somebody wants to learn theta healing, it's not free. And sometimes when we're in relationships and we have children, we think, oh, do I really want to take that $500, away from my grocery bill and, put that into myself? Things like that, I find. So do you feel that way? Like some people are scared to invest in themselves because they don't want to take it away from something else or somebody else?
Yes, well, and I would kind of relate that to lack mentality versus a wealth consciousness, right? So they're seeing it as a cost and as an expense and as a liability instead of an investment. So it's someone who's an ex-stock person. It's like the one thing people always say, because it's so funny, because sometimes I'll work with business owners and they're like, oh, Anik, you used to work in the stock market. What stock should I buy? And I said, honestly, the best investment that you can make is the one in yourself, because it keeps paying dividends for the rest of your life. You are your biggest asset in your life. And so for me, I look at that and I get where they're coming from, because investing in yourself and seeing that as an expense really speaks to the specific mindset of a lack of recognition of you being an asset in your own life, if you will, if you kind of get what I'm saying, is that you're not even that. From that lack mentality, there's a lack of recognition that you are the instrument that creates wealth and prosperity and access and opportunities within yourself and within your life. So not that it's about, oh, I shouldn't eat this month. Like that's not what I'm getting at. That there's the mindset, and then there's the reality of what's in your bank account. But what I've seen is that when people make a decision, because I've taught people at all different levels of income and circumstances and situations. And the people that I've taught have simply made a decision that they're going to invest in themselves. And I cannot share with you the crazy experiences of people, like, you will not believe what happened. I had this, like, people that had like random money deposited that they weren't expecting. Somebody gifted them the class. Like, there's just like, it's really incredible. As soon as you make a decision, the universe conspires to support you. And I can't like repeat that enough to people. Is your job is to simply make a decision that you are worth it, and let the universe figure out the details of how that's going to show up with you. So I feel people kind of get in their own ways, or they already make a decision, oh, I can't afford it. And it's like, well, that might be true in your bank account, but what if you made a decision to simply invest in yourself? And maybe you don't have time, maybe you don't have money, but you do have time, right? Because it's like one of those things. You can go and get the Theta Healing book for 10, 15 bucks. You can actually go to the library and read it for free, right? So I've had students that's where they began. And so it's like, if you are dedicated to yourself and to your growth, money does not need to be an object unless you let it be. And that's the lack mentality versus wealth consciousness. So I've seen, I guess I kind of see that as is it a reason or an excuse, right? Because the subconscious is going to want to keep you exactly where you are, no matter how much suffering you're living there, because it's familiar and it knows exactly what to expect. And there's a consistency within that reality that it's adapted to.
I love that. So someone commented, this was a while back, 23 minutes ago. Sarah said, Anik, that's literally how I feel lately. And that was related to talking about getting up in the morning and just kind of like dreading.
Oh,
I'm not saying your life, but of course it's easy to become very.
no, yeah, and it's not that we don't love our families and our people and I get that. I so feel for you, Sarah, because I feel like I tap into it's like, and even when you have all the pretty things, and I want her to know that there is nothing wrong with her, that ache, that dread, that weight that she's feeling is her inner self's way of saying, I need more. And it's kind of like she's not maybe particularly starving when it comes to other things in her life, but she's starving in fulfillment and personal satisfaction, and allowing her soul to guide her to the next thing. And I find in that space, you're kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you've got like this, the weight of that dread. And then because you're kind of underneath that energy, if you will. So I'll kind of use what you were saying, because I do agree it's also an energy. There's the energy of it, the emotion of it, the mentality of it. Like there's all of the different flavors of energy that comes with that weight. That creates almost like a lack of clarity and capacity to gain connection to your soul's whisperings. And so I find like in that really sweet spot, that's when I invite people to lean on their loved ones, their support systems, on finding quiet spaces for them, and the tools that they can access in that moment, to go, okay, this is my body's way of something's wrong, right? Like just like when you're hungry and your stomach grumbles, that's your body's way of saying, I'm hungry. Well, that dread that she's feeling is her soul's way of saying, I'm hungry. And so I know sometimes that's not like the final answer, but that is the first answer to many, many more answers to come. Because there's always a what's next or what's now kind of question that I always ask myself, going, okay, what's now for me? Because it's kind of easy to get stuck in the future of what you should be doing next. And then you kind of miss out on the power that lives in your now moment. So I find sometimes to keep myself grounded, that's what I'll use instead is, okay, what's now for me?
I like that.
Next
Like
year.
more coming into the present and not worrying sometimes as much about what happened yesterday. And when we do theta healing, because I was going to get you to just quickly explain the process of theta healing, but like I just feel connected to explaining, because you're the best, because you taught me. But the layers of kind of how things unfold, like how when you're as the practitioner understanding the layers a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, maybe I'll start. Let me back it up a little bit to give our listeners a little bit of an understanding. So, theta healing is a modality that supports you in identifying limiting beliefs and releasing them. And now, a limiting belief is not limited to the thoughts that you have in your mind. Thoughts generate feelings, feelings drive behaviors, and your behaviors create habits and states of being that actually kind of dictate your physiology. So it's like when we look at limiting belief, I find there's kind of like it's actually a way bigger topic than, oh, I had a negative thought and I want to make it a positive one. And I know you know this, Robin, because you're like a rock star student and an amazing theta healing practitioner. So you get the discernment. But just for our listeners, when we're talking about limiting beliefs, I like to almost use the word a little bit more limiting patterns, because that patterning happens in your neurology, in your emotional state of being, which then directs and affects your behaviors, what hormones you're generating into your bloodstream, which receptors are being created and discreated within your red blood cells, and also how you show up in the world in a physical, mental, energetic, spiritual, and emotional capacity. So kind of, I want to start with that. I know that was kind of mouthful.
We just have a comment, and I know that we don't have tons of time, so I just want to make sure that everyone's heard. Melissa just said, yes, what's now for me? So powerful, and exactly what I just finished meditating on. Needed this confirmation. Thank you, Anik.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that, Melissa. That's great. Yeah, and that's an important thing. So coming back to, so with theta healing, what happens is a lot of the times you have a thought that creates an emotion, then creates a behavior, then it creates this automated response system. So when we're looking at the layers, it's not just, a lot of the times people will show up as a client going, I have this symptom or problem in my life. And then as a practitioner, what we do is we work kind of backwards with the cosmic intelligence or source energy or creator, God, whatever the term the client recognizes as their higher power. And we act as a witness, an observer, and we act as a message deliverer, if you will, between the client, their higher self, and their source energy in resolving the symptom that they have in front of them, recognizing that the challenge that they have in front of them is just a symptom to a pattern that is out of alignment and out of harmony with their optimal blueprint or their authentic state of being. So it's disempowering them in some way, and it's showing up as a symptom, a circumstance, or a challenge, or an illness, or what their bank account looks like in their life. So as practitioners, we move back to that point of inception, if you will, of that pattern that was created. And then what I've noticed when we do that as practitioners is we go back and we check in with their highest wisdom, because your body naturally desires to heal itself and bring itself back into balance. And it also has, on a deeper level, all the wisdom that's required in order for that to be achieved. So that's kind of the go-between information that we're relating between the client and their higher power.
And I wanted to do, for our last couple minutes, if you're open to it, a couple just clearings, just around those couple comments that came up, just to kind of like sum up all the energy that came through, because there was a lot like talking about entrepreneurship and like taking that like new step and that new direction. And my last card says renewal, Archangel Jeremiah, review and evaluate a favorable assessment of the facts, time to move in a new direction. So I can't help but feel like right now a lot of people are maybe nervous to make a change, or they're getting that hunch, but they're, maybe questioning themselves, like a lot of throat chakra. When we were talking about Sarah, I was getting this feeling in my throat, like almost like a lump. And, and you just have that feeling of like, I know I need to do this in my heart, but my throat like won't let me. Like I want to be honest and tell people how I'm feeling, but I just can't. That resistance. So would you have any clearings around or downloads around any type of resistance there that people might be feeling towards either being present or making a change?
Yes, and it's so funny because I was drinking my coffee this morning thinking about our talk. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I blurted something out loud and Carrie said, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just talking to myself." And it's actually exactly what we're talking about now. So coming back to your card, so here's the first piece, because so when it comes to healing, growing, evolving, the first piece is self-awareness and you make a conscious decision that you want to make a change. That step cannot be skipped. So that's like 90% of the work right there. Now, the biggest thing that we do in Theta Healing, I know we're going to go over a little bit, but hopefully you'll be patient with me, because I feel this is really important for everyone who's listening, is what we're looking at when we're doing Theta Healing is the gap between the conscious decision that you've made for yourself in your life and the subconscious patterns that are creating the reality, that are attracting or repelling opportunities to or from you. And so when we look at that gap, when you're saying your card, like evaluate what needs to change and so that you can move forward. I know that's not exactly what you said, but that's what I grasped from it.
It's like, it's okay to have logical as well. We need logical.
Yeah. So that when you first look at, here's a question, because I'm also a coach. So here's a question I would invite people to ask themselves is there's this discomfort or resistance, as you said, to change. What is the cost of staying the same? So are you ready, willing, and able to keep living day in and day out? Because what you can expect is just more of the same. Like, is that satisfactory? When you look back at your life at the end, how are you going to feel? And this is not to create any kind of regret but it's like you get to make a decision in every moment how you want to show up for yourself, right? Do you want to feel good about, yeah, you know what? It was scary and I did it anyway. Because it's whenever you transform a situation, regardless of it's from worse to better, there will always be discomfort, uncertainty, and the unknown. And so your subconscious is not a big fan of those things. Your subconscious loves certainty, it loves familiar, and it loves the known, and it wants to kind of stay there as much as possible, no matter how much you're suffering. It does have like kind of a safety threshold, but when you get to that point, like if you move because you have to, that means you've really suffered quite a bit at that point. So I would ask them, what is the cost of saying the same? Because that's what you can expect. You're just going to keep doing the same thing. You're going to keep having the same thoughts. You're going to keep making the same decisions day in and day out forever. Yeah. Until that time that you then make a change. Whether you do it now, do it tomorrow, do it next year, and do it next week, doesn't matter. That's kind of the situation you're in. And so I'm going to give everybody kind of the answer to, and it's a really simple answer, but it's really the only answer as far as I'm concerned, is the only thing that's really holding you back from making the decision to change is your fear. And so what happens to fear is when you shed light on fear, you take the power away from it. And you know this because you've done that training, especially when we do exploration of fear or fear digging, is as soon as we start moving through those layers of fear, you're like, wow, that would like never actually really happen. But yet until we bring it into the light, it keeps us paralyzed, so deeply paralyzed. And so what I was kind of feeling is doing a clearing and creating discernment and clarity for people to identify whether they're choosing out of love, which is love of self, love of community, love of their soul's purpose and mission, love of others, right? So love as a nutshell, versus whether they're choosing their fear. When you choose fear, you're going to choose the same situation you're already in. You're going to choose what you perceive to be the safest outcome. And from a subconscious level, it recognizes safety as known, certain, and familiar. But that doesn't, nobody ever said that had to be fun, exciting, or prosperous for you, right? So it'll just keep picking the same oatmeal every day because it's familiar, not because it's good. Is this making sense? Did I kind of lose?
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I want to kind of feed you back with comments, which Stacy says so true. When you're just, I think, discussing the fear aspect of things, like just doing exactly what you just said, doing same old, and I think, isn't that like the definition of insanity or something?
It is Einstein's definition of insanity. Absolutely, yeah.
And then Dale says, beautiful message of truth. And I do find like it, even just your vibration seems to be more uplifting and motivating, because I feel like people, when you're sharing this information, like people feel it too, like just into your voice. It's not something you're feeding people with to make money, like it's in your heart space, which I love. So I feel like people are going to gravitate, like after this, if I'm going to get you to leave your information as well, maybe just in the comments once you get off, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I know people will, that need the training or need
well, and I appreciate that you share that, because for me, it's like sharing this message is not about catalyzing people into fear so they'll make a decision to change. That's the old model that I want to support in disintegrating. Is I would love to get people motivated out of love, because when you make choices out of love, you're not beating yourself up and you're not suffering on your way to your goal. But when you choose fear, or when you are catalyzed into change through suffering, you're black and blue all the way there. And it's a really inefficient way of growth, evolution, and learning. And so what I really want to kind of share with people is that love is the most powerful vibration in the world. And we know this. It's the most powerful vibration in the universe. We know this. And yet we allow fear to run our engines. And fear is kind of like burning gas. It has an environmental impact within us. Whereas like love is like solar panels. I know solar panels aren't perfect, but it's like there's no cost to using love to move you forward. But there's a big price tag to using fear to do that. So what I'm feeling as a healing support for people that are kind of in that in-betweeny space and going, okay, that's great, Anik. Thanks for all that data, but how do I move forward? How do I embody this? So here's what I'm feeling, and feel free to throw in anything that you feel resonates too, Robin.
I'm gonna let you do it because I'm feeling I'm receiving everything you're throwing out there.
Oh, cool. So here's what I'm getting. So I'm going to get everyone to sit and just take a breath. And one of the most core things that will support you is creating discernment between being motivated and guided by love. And let's show you what that is, what that feels like, and how to embody that. Let's show you how to recognize all the times that you were led by love and all the positive, effortless, and prosperous experiences that you were able to achieve through using love as a catalyst and as a fuel for your life. Would that be okay?
Yes.
And now let's allow you to create discernment on all the situations that you've used in the past. You've used fear in the past to move you forward, to drive you and to fuel you into your achievements, and the price that you've paid in using that as a catalyst, as a motivator, and as a driver. So let's just give you some self-awareness and also the recognition that you get to choose different if you decide to, that you have that power. Let's go ahead and give you that wisdom. And what I'm hearing from creators now, let's teach you, for everyone who's open and receptive to it, how to learn, grow, and evolve, how to expand, how to achieve without using fear as a fuel, as a catalyst, or as a motivator, and instead using love to do that very thing. Would that be okay? So with Theta Healing, it's always a conscious decision that you're making. So if this speaks to you, say yes out loud and just allow yourself to receive those activations. When we do Theta Healing, we not only change the neurology, not only the emotional balance, but we change your physiology and your habits, and allowing you to embody these things and not just have them as a really cute little inspirational post on your wall, right? We all know what we need to do. The challenge is actually doing and embodying and applying it. And that's where the gap is between what we consciously know and what our subconscious patterns support us in achieving. So that's why I love Theta Healing so much, because it addresses that block that's in between. You know, I can almost tell blocks are either fear or lack of wisdom. Like, and not that we don't know, but your body doesn't know how to allow love to guide it, how to trust yourself without fear, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let me integrate all of those changes. And let's show you what it is, what it feels like, and how to easily and effortlessly connect your inner wisdom and to get a clear response when you ask the simple question of what's now for me. There.
Get me all teary-eyed. Thank God we're not,
Aww.
not on camera. I'm just lighting my pillow Santo here, and I have this like beautiful candle, and it feels so just warm. Like that's what I get, is like a warmth.
What I'm getting, so I actually have, it's so funny because I'm not really a card puller, but I've got this, I've been playing a lot with the 6th plane of existence these days. And so I've got these sacred geometry activation, like it's an oracle deck. And I pulled these actually during the class that I taught Dig Deeper last weekend, but I felt called to keep them out because I felt like they were going to be the theme of the week, and they're yelling, kind of not yelling, but they're calling to me again. And so here's the message that they shared with me is when you move into a state of belief in yourself, that is when you connect to your higher wisdom, which then allows you to open into the flow of infinite prosperity and abundance.
Feels so feminine too for me.
Yeah, I love it. Well, fluidity, right? And there's almost like a self-love nurturing element to trust yourself. I know, I feel like, and I'm not sure where it comes from, but we're so challenged in trusting ourselves and believing in ourselves and having faith in ourselves. And that is the biggest obstacle to achieving our dreams. Because if you don't believe in yourself, well, then you've already lost, right? Like, good luck. But if you can move into an acknowledgement of, and not like blowing hot air up your own skirt kind of thing, but going, you know what, I'm really good at this. And we have such a fear of acknowledging our gifts and our skills and our capacities because we're like, oh, I don't want to be egotistical because that's being a bad person. But it's like self-love is about honoring and recognizing without ego. It's not, this isn't about ego. This is about self-love, self-recognition, and also self-actualization. So there's sometimes we like, especially as healers and holistic practitioners, we're so afraid to fall into the trap of the ego that sometimes we deter and diminish in ourselves in being like, we got to be extra humble because we're so afraid of allowing the ego to take over. But it's about finding that sweet balance and going, you know what? I have this gift and I'm not going to, it's not that I'm better than other people, is I'm good at this. And the ego is I'm better than you or they're better than me. That's an unbalanced ego. But the I'm good at this, and there's lots of other people in the world that are good at things as well. And so there's an equality perspective that we all have beautiful gifts. And that's when we find kind of the balanced ego. And I know sometimes in our industry, it's all about overcoming the ego and fighting the ego and ego is so bad. And it's like, well, ego is a part of your human expression. It's about balancing it, not so much annihilating it, right? Because your ego has a purpose in this life experience. It's allowing it to work with you from a balanced perspective instead of working against you from a fear or unbalanced capacity, which is where, if you will, we get into trouble kind of thing.
Beautiful. So if I were to title this, I kind of feel like it's about like living in your true identity, or living in your true self, or like learning to
I would call it empowered self-mastery. That's what kind of
yeah, that sounds good.
yeah, well, that's sorry, I can't take credit for that one, that just dropped in. And I was like, and that's really, I kind of feel like what's the message that I'm here to support people, especially professionals and practitioners, is when you step into the vibration of love, you empower yourself to be the master of self and then show up in the biggest and most beautiful way to create that impact that you're here to do in the world. Right. It's like, so for me, playing that role kind of excites me because I'm like, wow, if I help other people be empowered and mastering themselves, then whatever it is that their gifts are, they're showing up and creating a bigger impact, which leaves all of us in a better spot. How cool is that?
It's amazing. So it's just like confirmation that after 10 years, you being this like integrative health person, coach, healer, whatever, you instructor, it's just confirmation that, you know, after doing this for a decade, you're probably going to be doing it for another 1,000 years easily. In some
I kind of feel like probably before I got here, I was doing it for 1,000 years easily. And I can see that my soul has this passion around teaching, educating, training, speaking, like, and I mean, if you know me, I'm always long-winded. If you talk to my husband, I never shut up. So it's like, I feel like speaking, educating, and training is like in my DNA. And so it's like, I don't know that that's going to change anytime soon.
And I know you need to get back to your family, but thank you so much for, I don't know, creating the Theta Healing family as well. For people that don't know, Nick just creates, basically, I feel like, communities for people. Maybe if you are lonely and you don't have maybe the support system that you need, I know that there are prayers sometimes sent out, or just little things like that you might think are such a small thing that you're doing, but they're actually like amplifying times 1,000 as well. So I find it's the people that you bring together that's like the most powerful. It's sometimes less about the theta healing and more about the community and the family that you've created for people, not just in New Brunswick, but in like the world, I feel.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a beautiful, I love that you brought that up, and thank you so much for sharing that, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know, if if this is helpful or not, or if this is kind of just being annoying, or if it's actually me being like, hey, there's these people here that are your soul family, whether you know them or not, like ask for prayers, they'll support you. But I love creating that community of the highest, like in the highest vibration, and bringing those connections together. Because like one way they say, it's like a rising tide raises all ships. And I feel like that community, that support, and that's why on my website, if they ever want to check it out, it's masteringascension.com. There's a whole resource section for whether you want to listen, or if you want to read, or if you want to watch, if you want to action. And then there's all these communities that are attached there that people can explore. So I've kind of created like this hub of, no matter what level of support that you need, or what type of support that you kind of prefer, there's an outlet for that for people, so they can certainly check it out.
Well, thank you so much. I don't want to cut you off.
No, that was it. That's all I have.
Tina, I just want to make sure, because for me, because I'm new to this, and I really appreciate having, like, I don't know, I just feel like it's all magical to me. I feel like the ball of tears right now, just because it's so, like, I'm similar to you, you know, you feel like you're planting seeds, but sometimes you don't always get, like, you have to wait for seeds to grow kind of thing. So I just feel like having you in the space allows the seeds to, like, there's like 100,000 more seeds than there were before in the beginning. But the comments for me are really important in this experience too, because like you probably can't see them, but I just want you to make sure that, like, that, you know, even just like being present here, how you're helping. Because Tina said, thank you for sharing, Anik and Robin, Melissa. I'm so happy that I caught this live. This is exactly what I needed. I opened my Oracle deck book, and as you were talking about discernment, I turned the page and the serenity prayer was there. This live gave me so much joy and so much confidence and encouragement. Thank you, Anik and Robin. Led from love and not motivation, or lead from love and not motivation, the answer I needed on so many levels. Shared this beautiful message. Thank you so much. I'm glad I caught this session. My heart feels full. I needed this. So just in the present, like, just anyway, it's those little tiny things that are so.
Well, and I want you to know, like, from my heart to yours, Robin, is just because I've been at this for 10 years. I know you've been in this energy for a long time, is sometimes you don't hear back from people because of how well they're doing. I've learned this the hard way. And it's like, I don't know if I'm really helping. And then you'll hear from someone like 3-4 years later, and they're like, that one session that I did with you, after that, my whole life changed. And then they moved provinces and they met their soulmate and they got their dream job. And like, it's so interesting because here, sometimes you're sitting going, oh, I don't know, I thought it was a good session. You never hear back from them. And it's sometimes it's because of how awesome they're doing. And sometimes it just takes a little while for, you know, like those flowers to bloom, so to speak, just because we're in spring and I'm like full mode gardening. It's like those seeds that we're planting, they're germinating whether we see them or not. And that wave of change that you're creating, please don't ever underestimate your field of influence, because we only see such a fraction of the vibration that we're putting out there. We very, very rarely and seldomly will see the full effect of what we're creating in the world around us. I kind of imagine that when we go back home, then we'll actually see the extent of it. But that wave never stops moving, right? It just keeps going. So just kind of keep that in mind, that sometimes it might feel small, or you know, you're like, oh, you're only X amount of likes or 2 comments, or, but it's like, what I notice is the people that get the most effect and support are actually the ones that sometimes don't kind of will post it, and they're like, oh yeah, I'll get messages and go, oh, I watch all your stuff, and I'm like, really? I've never seen them like it or comment on it or say anything. And then they're the ones that are like choosing to like work with me on a deeper level. So I always found that, and I'm kind of like that too, is I'll watch things, but I tend not to engage. So for those of you who are secretly watching our session, thank you so much for being here as well. We're going to acknowledge those people as well. That sometimes it's interesting how it takes courage to comment, right, or to acknowledge something within ourselves. So
And hopefully all of those downloads, people are saying yes to, and then that can also change as well. Maybe people will get inspired to start interacting or start commenting. And
yeah, well, what's really fun is that when you release your fears around what will people think if I share this or say this, or it's silly or it's a dumb question, then you give other people the courage to ask questions as well, because there's no silly question. There's only answers yet to be sought. And really, having taught like hundreds of people, is what you think is a silly question is what everyone else is also wondering. But be the courageous one to ask it, or be the courageous one to acknowledge something within yourself. Just that one comment, you have no idea how much inspiration you're creating in that wave of openness, authenticity, and honesty.
beautiful. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll let you go. I'm gonna go feed my wee one who's home from school today.
Oddly enough, my landscaper and gardener is here getting ready to plant all my flowers for spring.
Of course they are. Of course they are. And those bulbs will be there blooming for years to come. And that is kind of like a perfect analogy of investing in yourself. There'll be twice as many bulbs next year with twice as many blooms.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you again somewhere in the future.
We will. I'm sure our paths will cross again soon.
Okay.
Bye, my love, and bye, everyone. And thanks for everyone for listening.